story in which Moses is complaining to his public relations director that there is a lack of coverage in local Egyptian news media. Nothing seems to be getting the attention it should. And so, in conversation, the public relations director replies, "You're not getting the newspaper coverage you want, Moses, because you are not doing anything exciting." Moses answers, "Very well. I shall go down to the Red Sea, wave my right hand, the waters will part, and the Hebrews will pass through safely. Then I will wave my left hand, the waters will return, and the pursuing Egyptians will be swallowed up." The PR director replies, "If you do that, Moses, I can guarantee you 4 pages in the Bible." And so apparently the PR person was able to deliver on the promise, and the pages of the book of Exodus see this event as the event of all Hebrew history. How differently would we treat the account from Exodus appointed for today? Our summations would sound something like a network news broadcast in an attempt toward objective reporting. It might go something like this. It was reported today that a band of Israeli refugees escaped across the border of Egypt. In an unexplained phenomenon, the Israelites reportedly moved their entire company into and across the Red Sea. No casualties or deaths were reported. However, the Egyptian military unit charged with border security drove heavy equipment into the same body of water, and it is reported that they suffered a total loss of life and equipment. At this time, there is no further information available from our wire services. We will update any new developments or further information. To read the 14th chapter of Exodus is to lose all so-called objectivity. There's no apology in this account. The Exodus was deliverance and salvation to the Israelite. It was the chronicle of their delivery from the hand of the oppressor. It was their salvation. Every narrator would recount this day in celebrations, combining the emotions of our 4th of July and National Day of Thanksgiving. And the exultation exploded in thanks because of a confession of faith. For on that day the Lord saved Israel from the hand of the Egyptians. Never mind their protests when they stood on the shoreline and the water lapped at the hems of their robes. Never mind accusations against Moses that he had led them to this place to die. Never mind the presence of the pillar of cloud or the rod stretched forth from the hand of Moses. Never mind the attempts at explaining the unexplainable with walls of water held back and a dry path exposed as their gangplank. Never mind all that mystery and amazement, but do mind and give attention to their great confession and tribute. God, our God, saved us. Our God delivered us. Our God goes before us and comes behind us. Great is this God, our God, and greatly to be praised. So this is the deliverance event of salvation for the Hebrew. This is the event remembered and recalled, recited and celebrated. There was a time when God made a passageway out of oppression and opened the way to the promised future. Now, whenever there was occasion to wonder, what has God done for me lately? The answer would be, God led my people out of Egypt. God delivered me out of the hand of the oppressor and saved me. This passage is indeed a magnificent account. It is pivotal in scriptures not only as the main event in Israel's history, but also as the confession of faith lifted up and celebrated as well. Consider the following. First, God has a future for his people. Looking around at the pyramids, the slavery, the forced labor camps, one would have wondered, is this people being punished? Why is God allowing such terrible conditions to be present in this world? Has God abandoned us completely? Time after time, the scriptures lift up the chronicle of God, preparing a future for his people, one which they cannot as yet see. In Israel's experience of slavery, God had a promise of freedom. When Israel experienced exile, God had a promise of homecoming. When Israel experienced what seemed to be the silence of God, God raised up a prophet to speak his word. Pastors and congregations often hear the stories of people who relate their stories of despair and hope. A student walks in to thank someone for helping with monies needed for college. They were going to try the year not knowing where the funds would come from or how they would make ends meet. Someone in the congregation wanted to help that student, knowing the problems in the family, and gifts were given to help. There was nowhere to turn, but somehow a special gift through the congregation made the difference. Thanks for the help, says the student. The future looked closed off, but now it isn't. There's surprise in a gift of someone else's love and care. A person comes to speak about the numbing shock of the pink slip. It came with no warnings, no apparent reasons, a feeling of betrayal and abandonment, a feeling of powerlessness and pity. Could we share that information with some people? The network of relationships and contacts expands. After some weeks, a new offer comes, and while it was not from anyone within the congregation, the person is grateful and thankful for what numerous members in the congregation said and did during that time. I never knew what support and help our people would be. It was a surprise to receive the outpouring of someone else's love and care. The congregation gears for a new group of refugees. The family of 4 arrive with one small satchel of worldly possessions. They speak broken English, and the eyes and lives can do nothing but trust and hope. They arrive at the apartment. The following days are filled with visits, orientations, driver's licenses, jobs. In the loneliness of exile and the despair of culture shock, the day comes when the thank you is spoken. We came with nothing. We did not know what would happen. Thank you for your love and care. That future was once unknown. Now it is filled with new life. A person comes to visit a month after the death of a spouse. We were together for 64 years. I thought when she died, my life was over. It's so hard now to be without her. It's one day at a time with tears that come unexpectedly. I don't know if I told her often enough how much I love her. I thought I couldn't go on. But I look around and I think, maybe I can help or talk to someone going through the same thing. God sure keeps us close even in death. God keeps us close. And God opens a new future. A future not of our own making, but one of his own gracious provision. God has a future for his people. Second, God does not abandon or desert his people. Rather, we travel with him on our way. An anonymous writer has told a telling story in the popular account called Footprints. A man dreams a dream in which he looks back at the path of his life. For most of his life, he sees 2 sets of footprints in the sand, his and the Lord's. But over the lowest moments of his life, he sees only 1 set of footprints. The man, feeling betrayed, questioned the Lord. I don't understand why, when I needed you most, you would leave me. The Lord's answer is, it was then that I carried you. The theology of Exodus has become good news for all people. The story is an ever-present reminder of a God who delivers his people from the forces of slavery and oppression, sin and death. The gospel is of a God who has a future for his people, life-bestowing and life-opening. The gospel is of a God who accompanies his people and his creation never to desert or abandon, even in the midst of the most desperate of all situations. Today, the local Dallas LGBTQRSTUVXYZ community is celebrating Pride. Now, we can aptly compare this community to the oppression the Israelites in our reading lesson today. Many of the struggles this community has historically experienced included being treated as less than normal and beneath that of the definition of a God-fearing Christian of the day. Those who were not considered strictly heterosexual were labeled as ungodly deviants or having been afflicted with a medical disorder. They were denied many basic human rights, stripped of their dignity, often imprisoned or institutionalized, simply because of their sexuality. You might say the community has been enslaved through injustice and misunderstanding and an archaic mistranslation of biblical texts. Enslaved to a life that is less than humane in many instances. Enslaved in suffering, heartache, and mental and physical torture, and even death. God sent Moses to lead his enslaved Israelites out of the arms of its oppressors, and he does the same for the LGBT community as well. Will there be a parting of the sea experience that frees this community so suddenly as we have read about today? It seems that in this case, the Moses that God sends his people come in the form of many rather than one. The activists, the ministers, the school teachers, the politicians, the ordinary citizen. Yes, all of these are our modern day Moses, sent to lead the community out of its chains of oppression and into that promised land. As society has evolved and changed over time, so have laws and beliefs. But still today, in 2017, much is yet to be done. Every human being is equal and precious in God's eyes, and we are created just the way he intended for us to be. We are all his children, and we are all sinners. We all have our own unique path to follow, and no two are the same. Pride was created to lift the spirits and instill rightful self-confidence in the oppressed gay and lesbian community, who had been beaten down with words and fists and forced into a belief that they were less than their oppressors. The Israelites' day of pride came when they were freed from the Egyptians in the glorious display of the waters parting. We celebrate GLBT pride every year with, although much smaller steps, still steps that are moving into the right direction that will lead us to that freedom and equality that the Israelites must have felt. Pride is a word that has had a number of changes in meaning over its lifetime. In addition to functional shift, or taking on a new part of speech, and semantic drift, an evolution of usage resulting in changed meaning, both of which are common to many words in English, pride has undergone some subtle shifts, one of which is occurring right now. Language changes in real time. The noun form of pride precedes the verb, although both are quite old. The verb has been in use since the 13th century and the noun since Old English. In its original sense, pride was hardly something to be proud of, as it carried the meaning of inordinate self-esteem and an unreasonable conceit of superiority. In early use, pride was also often found in capitalized form, referring to one of the 7 deadly sins. The use of pride to refer to a reasonable form of self-respect began to appear in the 14th century, and the word has taken on a number of other shades of meaning since then. Pride may still switch easily between positive and negative connotations, as is the case with many other polysemous words. It is generally easy to tell which meaning is intended based on context. We took great pride in our daughter's honesty versus his overwhelming pride in his hair left me feeling unwell. One of the more recent shifts in the word is concerned with the modern gay rights movement, which, if it may be said to have originated with any one event, is tied to the riot that occurred at the Stonewall Inn in New York City on June 28, 1969, in which some 400 people protested the police raid of that establishment. In June of the following year, marches commemorating Stonewall were held in Los Angeles and New York City. Pride is frequently found modified by gay in early text referring to these events. John Hayes, from a 1970 New York publication of Gay Power, Issue 19 reaches the stands on Monday, June 29th, the day after New York's mass gay march and Gay In, concluding a week's activities on gay pride and liberation. from the minutes of a meeting of Ms. Gay Activist Alliance on the 21st of May, 1970. The Central Park gathering is rescheduled for Sunday, May the 31st, until Christopher St. Liberation Day. The committee will meet in conjunction with the Political Affairs Subcommittee on Gay Pride Week, chaired by Barbara Glover. At about the same time, there is also evidence of gay pride being used in reference to a collective sense of self-worth rather than tied to a specific event. Marty Stephen of the publication Gay Power in New York City, Volume 1, Issue 8, dated 1969. Gay pride and self-consciousness are valid tools to fight oppression. Bishop Mark here. As you may have guessed, we have run into some technical difficulties bringing you all of the sermon recorded on Sunday. Unfortunately, it seems that the final portion of the sermon somehow did not properly convert and we were unable to recover it. So, something a little different this week. I'm going to finish the sermon for you now, here, from my desk. I hope this interruption wasn't too much of a distraction. Now, let's get back to it. Where were we? Right. We were speaking about how there is evidence of gay pride being used in reference to a collective sense of self-worth rather than tied to a specific event. I then offered the example of Marty Stephen of the publication Gay Power in New York City, Volume 1, Issue 8, dated 1969. Gay pride and self-consciousness are valid tools to fight oppression. Prior to pride being associated with the gay rights movement, it was occasionally found modified by blacks, especially during the civil rights movement of the 1960s. From the Pittsburgh Courier, February 18, 1939, an interesting article titled "Black Pride, a Woman Speaks for Her Race," appearing in the February issue of the Atlantic Monthly, is authored by Mrs. Kimball Goffman. In her piece, the author expresses hope for dawning of the day when Negroes shall have more of pride in race and in the customs, habits, and achievements of Negroes. Stanley G. Robertson of the Los Angeles Sentinel was quoted on June the 28th, 1968. I think it was Martin Luther King, and I don't always agree with him, but I must in this case, if I'm quoting his words, who said that to him, black power should be interpreted as black pride. Gay pride was eventually shortened to pride alone and began to be used as a shorthand for the events of LGBT Pride Month, which is held in June. Initially, we see pride used in capitalized form and followed by the year in which it occurs. From a Boston publication, Gay Community News, on March the 18th, 1978. Groups, merchants, craftspeople, and individuals interested in attending Pride 78 should call. As Pride celebrations and events have progressed from year to year, they have been attended and celebrated by an increasingly broad range of groups, adding those who identify as bisexual, transgender, straight allies, and others. By the early 1990s, we see written evidence that reflects the broadened scope of Pride events. The date is often dropped. Pride is sometimes capitalized and sometimes not, and it is applied to a much wider range of events. From the International Gay Association Bulletin in Brussels, Belgium, dated October the 1st, 1991, people attending Pride celebrations should also circulate and sign the Stonewall 25 immigration petitions. The definition of the word pride has evolved and changed, just as laws and beliefs about the gay and lesbian community have. Attempting to predict what a word will end up meaning is often an exercise in futility, and pride seems to still be in a state of flux, but that is simply the nature of a living language, messy, hard to pin down, and relishing change. Hopefully the continued advancement and pride of the LGBT community will be one on the less side of messy and more concise and with less of a need for change as we become equal to our brothers and sisters. God's children. Many have suffered ahead of us, more will with us, and God willing, none will have to after us. But what can you do? Be the good definition of pride. Demand equality. It's how you were created, equal. God doesn't make mistakes. Love freely and share the love of Christ in all that you do. Be proud Christian men and women for others. And so, with the children of Israel, we celebrate the God who frees and delivers us, the God who sets before us a future full of promise, hope, and pride, and the God who accompanies us on our way. Lord God, you have called your servants to ventures of which we cannot see the ending, by paths as yet untrodden, through perils unknown. Give us faith to go out with good courage, not knowing where we go, but only that your hand is leading us, and your love supporting us. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.